She has given a voice to other victims. She should not have to be paraded in court for everyone else. I want to, in the beginning of this, put an entire trigger warning to anyone that is unfortunately a survivor of abuse, any type of abuse, and just anybody in general. This topic is unpleasant, is not even scratching the surface. There are certain sections that I'm going to put on the screen that I can't bring myself to read out loud. So that way everyone is informed. However, with that being said, I do think, particularly because Julesy and I had the hypergamy live stream last week, that this conversation is needed for multiple reasons. One, to give Cassie her dignity in the fact that she is naming her accuser. And two, to combat the rampant hypergamy online advice that is specifically targeted at young girls and is very dangerous. So we are going to start with coercion control in the corporations. You'll see throughout the lawsuit that all of Diddy's corporations are listed, as well as additional corporations named as corporations Doe 1 through 10 are listed. So any corporation having to do with him. And then we're going to talk about the claims, and then we're going to get into the settlement and the terrors of trial. This is the first page of the complaint. This is the first time I've read a complaint that has a trigger warning on it. It is very detailed. So let's start with the coercion first. We're going to get to the beginning of the lawsuit in a second, but I thought it would be better to kind of set up how could this have occurred for 10 years without anybody saying anything, and the level of coercion that manipulative, narcissistic, and people of power often enact on their victims. So according to the complaint, Paragraph 18, defendant Sean Combs, upon information and belief, resides within the state of California. At all resident times, Mr. Combs met the definition of employer of a plaintiff under all relevant statutes, which is important to note. The reason why all of these corporations are listed is because Cassie was an employee. She was signed to Bad Boy Records. So you see here, the defendants are Sean Combs himself, Bad Boy Entertainment, Bad Boy Records, Epic Records, Combs Enterprises, and Doe Corporations 1 through 10, which Doe Corporations is what they use when they don't have the specific corporate entity name. Those specific corporations that they are alluding to also include his advertising agency, most likely, as well as agency that housed his partnership with Ciroc, as well as De Leon, etc. So then defendant Bad Boy Entertainment is a music, media, and entertainment company founded by defendant Sean Combs, which includes the record label defendant Bad Boy Records LLC. At all times, defendant was an employer of plaintiff within the meaning of applicable statutes. And this is very important because I think it's not well known the length of her record deal and how this entire time she was in a coercive employer-employee forced relationship as well. Within months of her single coming out, Miss Ventura signed a 10-album deal with Mr. Combs' record label. Miss Ventura's first album, Cassie, was released in August 2006, debuting at number 4 on the US Billboard 200. Absolutely preposterous and wild it is, and it was, that she was ever signed to a 10-album deal. That is not the norm. The norm is 5 or 6 albums, maybe 3. 10 albums, she doesn't have 10 albums. The fact that he signed her specifically when she was 19 years old to a 10-album deal alludes to the amount of control and likely the intent to control her entire life, to control the money she received, to control her livelihood, her career, as well as exceeded into her person as well. And oftentimes when victims come forward, either months, years, whenever they work up the courage to say like, hey, I'm going to put forth these accusations against my accuser, people automatically ask, what took so long? It takes an incredible amount of strength to go and tell a lawyer, first and foremost, tell a whole nother human being that is not your family member, is not your friend, that you don't know, the allegations that we're about to cover. You have to sit across from the stranger in detail to them. Hey, for the past 10 years on XYZ date, I was beaten, I was raped, I was this, I was that, etc. Not only do you have to tell the lawyer, now you're filing it in court. This is a civil case. This is not a criminal case. So now a judge, a jury, if you move forward with a jury, is going to know all your business. This is public record. So now the public is going to know your business. The public is then going to nitpick and judge you as to, well, you had the money. Why didn't you run? And the reason why is, the underlying reason of all this is the 10-album deal. She was going to go where? She has now been locked into 10 albums. Most artists never even make 5 albums, much less 10. And so we're going to hop around for a second to just highlight how many of these employees not only knew that this was going on, but aided and abetted. Miss Ventura tries to escape Mr. Combs' abuse. Anytime she tried to create distance between her and Mr. Combs, he used his network to find her and convince her to return to his abuse. On multiple occasions, Mr. Combs sent employees to lure Miss Ventura back. Employees that are employed in various capacities at the record label, at the overarching Combs LLC, the parent corporations, were allegedly sent to tell Cassie, like, oh, hey, you know what? You should just go home. Everything is fine. Just, it's going to get better. Go home, which is disgusting. After this specific incident, Miss Ventura left her home in Comstock and went to hide away at a friend's home in Florida. James Cruz, president of Bad Boy Management, tracked Miss Ventura down and told her that her single would not be released if she did not answer Combs' phone calls. Allegedly, a woman who worked at Sony Music reached out to her with a similar ultimatum concerning her record. Incredibly, Mr. Combs even convinced one of his attorneys, the fact that an attorney would call and do this is flabbergasting, to call Miss Ventura at this time. This lawyer told Miss Ventura that it's in your best interest to call Mr. Combs back. She basically was not returning his calls because of the abuse. Each time Miss Ventura tried to run away, Mr. Combs and his powerful network would force her back to him. So this is the lawsuit introduction and then a brief summary of what is in the lawsuit. So this is going back to the beginning. In 2022, Mr. Combs received the Lifetime Achievement Award at the BET Awards. During his acceptance speech, Mr. Combs stated, "I have to give a special shout out, thank you, love, to the people that was really there for me." He named a number of people before adding, "and also Cassie for holding me down in the dark times, love." The truth, however, is that Cassie, Miss Cassandra Ventura, was held down by Mr. Combs and endured over a decade of his violent behavior and disturbed demands. For Miss Ventura, the dark times were those she spent trapped by Mr. Combs in a cycle of abuse, violence, and sex trafficking. Among other violent and unlawful acts, Mr. Combs, and again, these are allegations from a legal sense, however, an allegation that has receipts, well documented. The allegations read, Mrs. Ventura in her own home after she tried to leave him, often punched, beat, kicked, and stomped on Miss Ventura, resulting in bruises, burst lip, black eyes, and bleeding. Blew up a man's car after he learned that he was romantically interested in Miss Ventura. That person in question's car was Kid Cudi. Kid Cudi has since confirmed that yes, that is true, that his car was blown up in his driveway. Forced Miss Ventura to engage in sex acts with male sex workers while masturbating and filming the encounters, and introduced Miss Ventura to a lifestyle of excessive alcohol and substance abuse, and required her to procure illicit prescriptions to satisfy his own addictions. Miss Ventura met Mr. Combs in 2005 when she was 19 years old and he was 37 years old. The age gap here cannot be understated. To the women out there promoting hypergamy and particularly promoting young girls to be with older men of means, that they are inherently putting young girls in a very dangerous and harmful situation. During hair and makeup leading up to the performance, Miss Ventura's hairstylist and Mr. Combs' makeup artist told Miss Ventura that Mr. Combs was interested in Miss Ventura. Miss Ventura shrugged off the gossip and in fact expressed disgust given the large age gap between her and the president of her record label. That allegedly did not deter him. The amount of grooming that is going on and is being encouraged on the internet is very, 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 very dangerous. The complaint then goes on to state that even though Cassie turned Diddy down, a year later, they performed. He then forcibly kissed her while he knew that she was dating somebody else and he was dating Kim Porter, to which she cried and went and told her best friend, but also told her friend that because he was her boss, again, emphasis on boss, that she felt like she couldn't tell anybody else because she was afraid that her career would be in danger. Throughout the complaint, you'll hear the reiteration of, well, I just wanted to sing, and now my dream is being weaponized against me, because again, he had her sign a 10-album deal, which is absolutely ridiculous. He also introduced her for the first time to ecstasy, which she didn't even know what the pill was. According to her, people get bamboozled into going to out with their boss in any regular situation. So it's not far-fetched to think that in the same instance, going out with your boss is like, oh, I guess I have to go with my boss. Oh, my boss is doing this. Like, I guess I have to do this. This is really uncomfortable. All right. It then got so bad in early fall 2007, Mr. Combs flexed his power and influence when he paid a promoter to allegedly create a fake flyer for a party hosted by Miss Ventura. This fake posting allowed Miss Ventura to have an excuse to go to Miami, Florida, and get her away from her boyfriend by using the guise of a legitimate event she had to attend. Because when you're assigned to a record label, you have to do marketing and promotion. It is in your record deal. Miss Ventura was stunned at how easily Mr. Combs was able to recruit others to lie for him. Because again, you would have to get wardrobe to lie. You'd have to get hair and makeup to lie. You'd have to get the assistant to lie. And because she was scared to go against his wishes and face repercussions to her nascent career, Miss Ventura agreed to join Mr. Combs in Florida. During this trip to Miami, Mr. Combs provided Miss Ventura with copious amounts of drugs, and she became more intoxicated than she had ever been before. And her intoxication lasted throughout the weekend trip. As she wanted Mr. Combs to continue to support her career, she felt she could not refuse Mr. Combs' urging to take more. After providing her with, Mr. Combs had sexual intercourse with Miss Ventura during this trip. And throughout the complaint, there is a pattern of him supplying her allegedly with drugs and then forcibly having sex with her. And I say it in that manner because in college you learn. They put giant posters up in the colleges. Yes plus no equals no. Yes plus maybe equals no. Yes plus alcohol equals no. Yes plus drugs equals no. Goes on to say, and this is a huge HIPAA violation that he was basically put staff in place, so assistants in place to attend to her day-to-day travel, other needs, including medical care. On multiple occasions, Mr. Combs allegedly had Miss Ventura's personal medical records sent directly to his email address. For instance, when Miss Ventura began experiencing memory loss, potentially due to excessive drug use and her head injuries caused by Mr. Combs' beatings, as described below, her MRI results were provided directly to Mr. Combs. Mr. Combs also repeatedly arranged for his staff to drive Miss Ventura to certain doctor's appointments. The causes of action, there are 8. So you have sex trafficking, which we're about to get to, so trigger warning to this. Then you have violation of the New York Services for Victims of Human Trafficking. You have California's Human Trafficking Victims Protection Act, battery, sexual battery, under both California and New York. And then you have violation of victims of gender-motivated violence, as well as sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and hostile work environment, because again, this all occurred while she was an employee under that 10-album deal. The FOs became work for Miss Ventura, and despite her protestation, Mr. Combs insisted on these intricately staged and forced sexual encounters between Miss Ventura and various male sex workers. It should be noted that when this started occurring, she is only 21 years old. She has now been coerced into this relationship with this now 40-year-old man. This is the first time that she's dating somebody at this age, and the level of coercion where he would repeatedly tell Miss Ventura that this was our thing and our secret in order to basically con her into thinking like, well, this is what rich people do. This is what people of means do. This is what people of my age and status do. And this is not normal. It never was normal. But again, at 21 years old, when now you have been saying no this whole time, you're like, I don't even want to be in a relationship with you. Like, you're my boss. And now I have a drug addiction. I am doing this because you're forcing it to me. And all I wanted was my career. I think that has to be stated multiple times. The level of coercion and then the numbness that is occurring is often, if you read any accounts of survivors of human trafficking, it reads just like this. During one instance where he beat her during a party in a hotel suite as she was screaming, and he punched and kicked her while she was curled. This is very hard to read, so I will let y'all read paragraph 114. I'll just read the last part. Her screams were drowned out by the loud music playing in the outside area of the hotel suite. When Mr. Combs, head of security and assistant, saw Miss Ventura after the assault, they began to cry. Miss Ventura had 2 black eyes, a burst and bruised lip, and a huge welt on her forehead. It's the fact that I'm sure the assistant feels so awful and so helpless in that the assistant that's not their job description. That should be in nobody's job description to witness any of this. And I'm sure the assistant probably also terrified. And the security at this point is breaking down crying of, how do I help this woman get out of the situation? And can any of us get out of the situation? And this is a cycle of abuse that involves so many people at this point. The only people, to be quite frank, when you read through the way the complaint is written, that I'm like, you're fully complicit and you were not abused, are the other executives at this company that have been called out. And these other executives that specifically called, harassed, and told her like, hey, back to work. Call that man back. I don't care what's happening to you. Those people are not being abused. Every other person, that staff that is not even getting paid that well, is also being abused. It's abusive to watch someone being abused and you can't help them, because the normal human reaction is to help somebody. And this is beyond vile. Girl, I feel you. I'll drink one for you, Tima. Let me take a second. Ugh. Okay, so now to talk about the settlement. The settlement occurred in record time, in less than 24 hours. The case was settled. And specifically, I want to focus on why 99% of cases settle in the first place. I'm talking about any type of case. In a case of this nature, the settlement makes sense, because trial is extremely unkind, and that's putting it nicely, to victims of abuse. So often they will bring up character evidence, which they're not supposed to in certain states bring up character evidence about the character of the victim. They will bring that up just to mess with the victim, to get to taunt the victim. And with a case of this nature, she put everything out there. This is the humiliation I've faced. This is what I've been forced to do. Forcing her into a trial would be inhumane, to be honest. So this is from the Hollywood Reporter. Cassie reportedly added in a statement, "I have decided to resolve this matter amicably on terms that I have some level of control. I want to thank my family, fans, and lawyers for their unwavering support." And I think the most important part of this is, I want to resolve this matter in terms that I have some level of control. This is a woman who unfortunately has been put through the worst amount of abuse for 10 years with no control over any of her life. This is very similar, and somebody said that in the comments as well, to a conservatorship. One and the same. You have somebody forcing people to drive you to and from the hospital, allegedly, when you are getting battered and bruised. You have people looking at your health records, your MRI, because now you have memory loss because you have been plied with drugs from the time you were 20 years old. You have people buying you a home to lock you in said home, to lock you in hotel rooms. That is kidnapping. There's no control over that, over yourself. There are allegations in the complaint that stated even she lost multiple friends that tried to stick up for her and were like, hey, stop that, to which some of her friends have been allegedly assaulted. And that then deteriorated the friendship. So she didn't have anybody. So I definitely understand wanting to be like, hey, I want to settle this on my terms. Because a lot of times, most victims want to be heard. This is in the public record. She has been heard. It will never go away. It is always going to be in the public record that she made all these allegations. And she made these allegations so specifically because most likely she has the evidence to back them up. The screenshots, the voicemails, the text messages, the physical evidence, the doctor's visits, the amount of time she's had to go to the doctor. So I think that makes a lot of sense. There are so many people who have witnessed things who would likely have been paraded into the court to be like, yeah, of course he did that. And simultaneously, the toll it would have taken on somebody who has been subjected to this level of abuse and violence for a decade probably would have led to some sort of breakdown. So Douglas Wigor, a lawyer for Cassie, proceeded to respond in a statement saying, Mr. Combs offered Miss Ventura 8 figures to silence her and prevent the filing of the lawsuit. She rejected his efforts and decided to give a voice to all women who suffer in silence. And I know people will push back and say, well, then why settle? Because of the fact that she even put this out there, she has stated like, hey, this happened to me. I'm having the courage to say this out loud, to air out all of the things that have happened to me that I've had to live through now for all of these years, she has given a voice to other victims. She should not have to be paraded in court for everyone else. If you want to put yourself through trial, more power to you. But here you have somebody who named the thing, who called out the executives specifically by name, said so-and-so called me and threatened me, so-and-so did this, so-and-so saw this, all of these companies, all of these assistants have been abused, all of these security guards, the security guards now are complicit, they didn't even want to do this to me, all of this abuse is taking forward. So I don't think it's particularly fair for other people to be like, well, you should have went to trial. Were you going to sit there and hold her hand throughout the whole trial? Were you going to sit there and pay for the extra therapy to make sure a mental breakdown is not going to occur when she has to sit there and look in the face of her abuser?